Porter, I am joined now by the social policy analyst, Dr. Rakib Ehsan. This guy's got a brain the size of a planet, and he's going to help us out with this report here. Because, Rakib, all too often I hear people come on and say a couple of things to me, that racism is absolutely rife and rampant. I don't see it because I'm white, apparently. But also that these surveys, well, they survey everyone. They ask people questions like, oh, would you mind living next door to someone who was of a different race to you? And, of course, you can't trust what people say in that. But this survey includes people who are actual ethnic minorities who are saying they feel that this country is better than the USA, than France and Germany. So here we go.
No, absolutely, Patrick. And these are points that I've made many times before in our previous conversations, that when it comes to being a member of a racial, ethnic and religious minority, Britain is one of the best places to live in the world. And I think that it has a more favourable environment for members of minorities than a number of EU member states, including France, Germany and the Netherlands, but also the United States, which I consider to be a bitterly divided society on matters of race. So I think that on the whole, when you look at modern day Britain, it's far more at ease with the racial, ethnic and religious diversity which characterises society compared to other countries.
Yeah, 100%. And it's interesting, isn't it? Look, you've got Germany and France there, two pillars of the European Union. I'm sorry, but I've travelled to a huge number of EU countries, as I dare say many people will have done in Britain, and you can see hardcore evidence that they are less well integrated and they are less well developed when it comes to tolerance and inclusivity. You can just see it. You can always use football as the example if you have to fall back on it. Italy, for example, Spain, I mean, good grief, take your pick across the continent. But when people do say that they still feel as though that Britain has got a huge amount of work to do you buy that, or do you think that maybe some people see racism because it might suit their agenda?
Now, firstly, I make the point, Patrick, when it comes to the provision of anti-discrimination protections, for example, on the grounds of race, ethnicity and religion, Britain outperforms a number of EU member states. As I said, France, Germany, the Netherlands, also Spain and Italy. I still think there's some very serious problems surrounding racism in much of southern Europe. Yeah. But I think that in terms of, looking at the figures, how do we move forward? I think that even though Britain is a relatively successful multiracial democracy, and I think that actually that should be a source of national pride, if truth be told, I think there's still improvements to be made. For example, if you look in the employment market, Patrick, names which are not traditionally English sounding, they tend to fare worse. When you look at those CV-based experiments, especially Muslim-sounding names, I also think that when it comes to healthcare, you can have a more responsive and efficient healthcare service as the population becomes more diverse. I think police-community relations is an area of improvement as well. I think especially in London, the Metropolitan Police Service has not done itself any favours in recent times. But I think that if there's one country which traditionally actually focuses on those kind of issues and has that spirit of collective action to resolve those race-related issues, then Britain is one of the leading countries in the world, in my view.
Can I just ask Rakib, one of the other key findings of this was that people, remarkably, would quite like the conversation about race to be less heated. And, well, yes, so would I, really. That would be nice. And people kind of talking about Black Lives Matter and almost forcing police to take the knee outside Downing Street. I mean, who's doing the heating up of the discussion, do you think?
Well, I think that this is something that we've discussed on a number of occasions, Patrick. I think there's been a great deal of brainless importation of toxic racial identity politics from the United States. It has a totally different history, and there's a totally different racial context in the United States compared to the UK. And the point I'd make is that many ethnic minority people living in the UK, they simply want fairness, not favours. So I think that that sort of US-style positive discrimination, which is very much an oxymoron in my book, affirmative action, that doesn't work here in the UK. Ultimately, the focus should be on equality of opportunity. So I think that what you need, if you're talking about a sort of mature and credible anti-racism politics in the UK, it shouldn't be drawing inspiration from the United States. It should be drawing inspiration from places like France, where I think it's a very rigid assimilationist model, where any kind of minority, religious or ethnic expression is frowned upon. I think that the British model is something that we can work with, and I think overall is a net positive.
Dr. Rakib, thank you very, very much. Dr. Rakib Ehsan, who is the social policy analyst. A little bit later on in the show, I'm going to be talking to our very own